Today is, I don't know, maybe the second or third week in this series of Interfaith, so we have a guest speaker that we're really excited about. But before I introduce her, I want to ask you guys a question. Today we're talking about Islam. And if you wouldn't mind turning to the person next to you, maybe there's one or two people that you have close by, and just kind of talking about what your impressions of Islam are today, what you know about the faith, what some are impressions that you have, and maybe you don't know much, and that is completely fine to just say that, but we'll just take a couple minutes and turn to the person next to you and share a piece of your mind with them. Okay, 30 seconds is up. Great. So I'm not going to do a big group discussion, but I just kind of wanted to prime your wheels in your head, thinking about stuff. So our guest speaker today has agreed to come and share with us. She 20 years ago founded an organization, and I'm going to get this right because I practiced it. It's the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona. And that organization sends speakers to organizations and schools all over the state to share information about the Muslim faith. So she has imams and, did I say that right? Imams? Rabbis, pastors, all on her speed dial. So she said it's one of her favorite things, that she has close friends and people that embody their faith, and it glows from them. She loves to see that. And so we're blessed. We're lucky to have her. Just a wonderful person to kind of jump into our series and give us a look into the Muslim faith. So will you please welcome, oh my goodness, Azra. I froze. I told her I'm so nervous about introducing people because I forget everything. This is Azra Hussain, everybody. Welcome her.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for including me in your weekly service. I always feel nervous when I come in. Actually, I'd feel nervous when I speak, as it is, and I've been doing this for 20 years. You'd say, oh, what is she talking about? I am not one of the people who's used to being or likes being up front. I'm one of the sound people and lights people. That was my thing in school. My sister, who's younger than me, was the one who was the main stage person who got the first billing on the program. You would find my name at the back of the program that said lights and sound. So unfortunately, somewhere along the line, it got changed, and I get to be up here all the time. So this is unusual for me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I begin. My name again is Azra Hussain. I was born and brought up in Kuwait. Anyone know or not know where Kuwait is? Oh, good. Everyone knows where Kuwait is. This is good. So I was born and brought up there. I went to British schools until the age of about 11 in Kuwait. And after that, I went to a boarding school in the south of England. After graduation, I got married and I moved to Arizona. So I've now been in Arizona for over 38 years. Almost a native. Not quite. But my children were all born and brought up here. I have 4 adult children. 2 girls, 2 boys. I have 2 grandsons. One's 11 years old, one's 2 years old, and I love being a grandma. Oh my gosh, nobody tells you how much fun it's to be a grandparent. Nobody. I used to imagine in my mind what it would feel like to be a grandparent. It is so much more than anything I could imagine. It's just pure joy. So thank you, God. While my children were growing up, I was very actively involved in just about everything they did. So I'm a trained Girl Scout leader, a trained Cub Scout leader. I served on the troop committee for the Boy Scouts. I served on all the PTOs of my children's schools. I volunteered in the classrooms, in the front office. I went on every single school trip as a chaperone and every single scout trip. I was one of those really scary moms. And now that I have no one less to harass at home, I end up harassing the FBI, the Scottsdale Police Department, and sometimes the U.S. Attorney's Office in their community outreach programs. So you can see I kind of keep myself busy just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do about a 35 to 40-minute presentation on Islam and Muslims, just to give you a 101 kind of thing, and I'll leave the rest of the time for questions, if that's okay with you. And if you have a question that's really burning and it has to be said right now, please go ahead and call me on it and just ask me. Because sometimes if you try and wait till the end, you've forgotten your question, and we don't want that to happen. And so I'm going to go ahead and begin right now. I'm going to greet you by saying Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum means peace be upon you. As a Muslim, I'm required to greet not just other Muslims, but all people in this greeting of peace. And this greeting of peace is not a very unusual greeting for those of us who practice monotheism, or Western form of monotheism. How many of you have heard the Jewish or Hebrew greeting Shalom? Shalom happens to be an abbreviation of Shalom Aleichem, for which the response is Wa Aleichem Shalom. Many, many churches where the pastor, where the pastor will reach out to the congregation and say, peace be with you, and the congregation then responds and say, and also with you. In fact, there are some churches that have a portion of their service that's, dedicated to passing the peace, where congregation members stand up and they greet everybody within their vicinity by saying, peace be with you, and also with you, with everyone. So this idea of greeting each other in peace is not unusual for those of us who, practice the Western monotheistic traditions. And Muslims, just like Jews, will greet using the Arabic phrase Salamu alaikum, and Jews will obviously use the Hebrew greeting Shalom. And the response to that, by the way, is wa alaikum assalam, and may peace be upon you too. You guys want to try that? By greeting me by saying assalamu alaikum? Go ahead. Oh, wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Not going to do an outline. The religion that I follow is called Islam. The word itself is an Arabic word. And the way the Arabic language works, much like Hebrew, is most Arabic words come from 3 or 4 letter root words. In the case of this word, SLM in that order, silm, is the root word. And the meaning of silm is peace. From this, you're going to get several words that come from that, like salam, assalamu alaikum, salam, peace be with you. And then the word Islam, the best definition I can give you is that it's a way of life where one is trying to achieve inner peace by obeying the laws of God. A person who follows this religion is called a Muslim. Now, how do you know that these two words are related to each other? Just look for that root word, S-L-M, in that order, silm. You can see that in the middle of this word as well. A person who follows the religion of Islam is called a Muslim. The word Islamic is an adjective, but it's not one that's used with people. Islamic art, Islamic architecture, but a Muslim person. Where are you going to find Muslims worldwide? In a world population of over 7 billion people, the last study done basically showed that there are about 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide. Well, that's almost a quarter of the world's population. Where are you going to find all these people? Amazingly enough, the largest number, and I'm see if I can do this. Oh, look at that. The largest number is found right here in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. 550 million Muslims right there in that small region. After that, you're going to find the next largest number is in Arabic-speaking countries. After that, Southeast Asia, places like Malaysia and Indonesia and stuff. And then the rest of Africa, and then Iran, Turkey, Central Asia, China, Europe, North America, South America, and Australia. So what I've just told you about is just about everywhere in the map right there, right? About the only places I didn't talk about are way up here and way up here. And I normally joke and say that's because Muslims know better. But that's because that's because I just can't take cold weather. I'm one of those weather wimps that basically at 69 degrees, I've gone into my closet and started layering up. And I'm not even joking. This sounds like a joke. I'm not joking. 69 is cold for me. And my kids also start feeling cold, but not at 69, at 65. So yeah, we're all weather wimps. Anyway, so all of these places around the world have had Muslim populations for a long time, not just recently, but they've been Muslim for generations, right? So what do Muslims look like? Muslims pretty much look like whatever country and culture they come from. So if you go to Europe, European Muslims, you know, if they're from Northern Europe, they're going to be tall, blonde, blue-eyed people. If you go to Spain, they're going to be brown-skinned people, a little like me. Arabs are going to look a lot like me. If you go to China, they're going to be, they look like other Chinese people. Same with Indonesia. You go to Russia, they're going to look like the local people. Muslims pretty much, you know, just like Christianity, is a faith that you follow. It is not a nationality. It is not a culture. It's just a religion. It's a way of life. So as you can see in the picture, you know, in front of you, Muslims look very different. They're a very diverse group. I want to talk a little bit about diversity amongst Muslims. But what makes human beings different? Right? So many things. What are the things that influence my behavior just on a personal level? Right? There are things that I do and say just because I'm a woman. There are things that I do and say because I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister. There are things that I do and say because I'm the director of an organization. All of these roles influence how I behave. I mean, I joke around about my weight influences what I wear. I walk into my closet in the morning, and whatever fits, that's what I'm wearing that day. And it's actually a little bit true. So, but that's on a personal level, right? What happens to generally? What are the things that influence many people? Things like culture, ethnicity, language, the economic status of your home where you were growing up, the political situation in the land you're growing up in. All of those things influence the way we as human beings behave, right? So when we look at Muslims around the world and we have somebody who's behaving atrociously, and we turn around and say, well, all the Muslims do this, is that fair? Is that truthful? Because if there's 1.8 billion Muslims out there in the world, I believe there's 2.1 billion Christians in the world. Do you really believe that all Christians behave the same way? See, that little giggle just told us what we want to know. So the same way, we need to be as honest as possible as to, you know, when we say, who's Muslim and what are they doing? Everybody's going to behave differently based on their circumstances. How many of you know somebody who, other than yourselves, somebody who goes to church at least once a week? How many of you know somebody who absolutely never goes to church? How about somebody who doesn't just go for the one weekly service, but is there almost every day to help out in different ways and to be at different services and different study groups, etc.? Right? Some of us know them as well. Well, in Islam, you're going to have the same kind of people. There are people who pray 5 times each and every day. There are people who absolutely never pray. And then there's people who don't just pray 5 times a day, they pray anywhere from 7 to 12 times every single day. And every one of them calls themselves a Muslim. Now, do you really believe that somebody who shows up to church every single day thinks and acts exactly the same way as somebody who never shows up? That's all I'm trying to point out, is that as much diversity in observance of prayer and variations in observance of worship and observing your faith can be applied to Christianity, the same thing can be applied to Islam, right? Muslims are just human beings. There's going to be some that are practicing their faith, there are some that are not, there's a ton of them in between, and so, you know, that's where you're going to see these differences. And not just that. Not just varying levels of observance, but many times what you see people doing is actually going against the teachings of their faith. Right? Until last year, when Saudi Arabia allowed women to drive cars, women in Saudi Arabia were not allowed to drive cars. So for you and me from over here, when we look out, we go, oh my goodness, what a restrictive religion. Women can't even drive cars in Saudi Arabia. Well, what you don't know is that's not a Muslim law. That's a tribal and colonial law that came on their books, and they tried to reinforce it with Islamic teachings. Well, there is a rule in Islam that a man and a woman who are not related to each other by being married to each other or related to each other by blood should avoid spending time alone together because of perception, right? Well, if a woman couldn't drive, then she needs a chauffeur because her husband, her dad, her son, or whoever is probably busy doing their own thing. If she needs to get to work, she needs to get to the doctor, she needs to get stuff done, she needs a chauffeur. Well, chauffeur is not going to be female, it's going to be male because women are not allowed to drive. And the moment that woman got in the car with a male chauffeur, two people were breaking the rules of their religion. So over and over again, over the years, Saudis used to object, and they would have protests, and they would be, quashed as they started. But all of us could see going, oh, what a restrictive religion. Women are not allowed to drive. If that was in fact the case, women around the world who are Muslim would not be driving, right? Every country would have that. In fact, in Jordan, not only do women drive, they fly planes. So Islam is not what's holding them back. It's the rules of the law and the laws of the countries they live in. This slide I really only talk about because of this over here. Many of us, when we hear about Muslims in the US, we think of them as recent immigrants or foreigners, and when in fact, 82% of all American Muslims are US citizens, and 42% of all American Muslims were born here. That's almost half American Muslims were born here in this country. And I don't know how to press. Okay, a little bit of history of Muslims in the US. Muslims do have a long history of being in the US. According to historians, 1 out of every 5 people that was forcibly brought to this country during the Atlantic slave trade was a Muslim. Since 1875, Muslims have migrated to America for about the same reasons that anyone else came here: to get away from oppressive governments, freedom of religion, better education, better jobs. For all the same reasons that any other group of people came to America is the same reason why Muslims came and continue to come, right? The same reasons. Now, some of the more famous ones that you may know is somebody who lived and died right here in Arizona towards the end of his life, Muhammad Ali. Another famous American Muslim was Malcolm X. And before him, the gentleman way up at the top over there in the left, his name was Abdurrahman Ibrahima. He was a prince in a West African country when his tribe fought another tribe, lost, and they were all sold to a slave ship coming to America. Now, when he landed here, he was sold to a plantation in the south where the plantation owner couldn't read or write. And yet, being a prince, this man was well educated, spoke several languages, knew the ambassadors to many countries, and he served as a slave on this plantation. And he helped keep the books because he could read and write. And so his name is Abdurrahman Ibrahima. In fact, PBS had a documentary out about him called A Prince Among Slaves. It's well worth watching. I think they actually posted on their website as well. Famous American Muslims today. Some you may know, some you may not. These people are, either athletes or they're on TV, in sports. Some of them you may have heard of, people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't know if anyone my age knows of DJ Khaled, but he's very popular with the teenagers. And then there's people like Dr. Oz. And people go, Dr. Oz? Yep. If you read his biography, he's also a Muslim. Many other Muslims are famous as well in sports, in our media, also in not just as news people. They're also musicians like Lupe Fiasco, somebody on CNN, what's his name, Fareed Zakaria, and so many of them. Now, many Muslims in academia as well, in universities such as Harvard, Harvard Law School, and Duke, and so many of them there as well. Also, Muslims have served in our armed forces and continue to serve as peace officers. In the city of Phoenix, officers that I know personally, there's at least 2 Muslim police officers. There are, my cousins, both brothers, served in our Marines, as Marines. So Muslims have served this country from a very long time ago, not just recently. This is something they've done for a very long time. I want to talk a little bit about Islam as a religion so that you understand what it is that I say when I say certain things. What does Islam teach? Just like the majority of faiths in this world, Islam teaches cultivation of excellent character and excellent morals. Islam is not deluded into thinking that human beings are going to be perfect. It is that pursuit of perfection. It is that striving to achieve and be a better person is what Islam is. A way of life where one is trying to achieve inner peace by obeying the laws of God. So I'm striving every day to do what's right, to do what's kind, to do what's respectful, to do what's just, to do what's honest. That's what Islam teaches me. But how do I get there? I'm just a human being. It's not something that I can just, I'm born and all of a sudden, wow, look, here she came. Wonderful Muslim woman. All of a sudden she's doing everything right. It doesn't happen that way, right? We all need to practice. And how I say this to people is, Islam is taught to people in 3 dimensions, in terms of beliefs, practices, and the goals of these beliefs and practices. And how I explain this to many people is, if I tell you that next Saturday I'm going to run in a 10K, well, you guys know nothing about me. So you'll say, oh, good for her, look at her go. Yeah, what you don't know is on a daily basis, I eat a lot of chocolate, donuts are my friends, and I get out of bed and go sit at my computer. When I get bored, I go sit in front of the TV. I enjoy my 3-year-old grandson, a lot of weightlifting there. And every so often I come and do presentations like this. Yeah, if I go join any 10K, within the first 15 steps I'm probably going to be out of breath, on the floor, gasping, right? But if I tell you that tomorrow I'm going to get myself a nutritionist, and I'm going to get myself a trainer, and for the next 6 months I'm going to train every single day, and I'm going to eat right, and then I'm going to participate in a 2K. And then again, I'm going to continue for the next 6 months after that and train every day and then participate in a 5K. And then 6 months after that, maybe join a 10K. You can sit there and go, oh, she might actually make it. She might actually finish. I might not place, but I might finish it, right? But it takes training. So for me, what I do is I tell people those beliefs and practices is like my training to achieve the goal of what I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to describe each one of these to you. Muslims have 6 major beliefs. We believe in one God, in His angels, in His prophets, in their holy books, in an afterlife, and in God's will. And I'm going to talk about each one of these in a little bit of detail. How many of you have heard the word Allah? How many of you believe that Allah is the God of the Muslims? Do you know that the word Allah is the Arabic word? Actually, it's 2 words. Allah, the God. It is the Arabic word for God. Arabic-speaking Christians pray to and worship Allah. Why? Because that's the word in their language that means God. If I speak only Spanish, it's the only language I know, what am I going to call God? Dios. So whether I'm Christian or Jewish or Hindu or even atheist, I'm going to say Dios when I talk about God, because that's the language I speak, right? And if it's German, I'm going to say Gott. If it's Farsi, I'm going to say Khoda. I've given you 4 different words for God. 4 different gods? Not necessarily, just 4 different languages, right? So the word Allah is the word for God in Arabic. Muslims believe in and worship the God of Abraham. This is why this particular tradition of monotheism has been referred to as the Abrahamic tradition of monotheism, because all 3 of these faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, can trace their roots back to the Prophet Abraham. And so that's why we're referred to as the Abrahamic faiths. Muslims, just like Jews and Christians, believe in angels. We believe that God created beings of an unseen light to do his work for him. And for Muslims, we believe that we're surrounded by angels in here, outside, and out in the universe. Muslims also believe in the archangels like Gabriel, Michael, Raphael. In Arabic, their names would be Jibril, Mikael, and Israfil. We believe that we can't see angels, at least with the naked eye. What you might have heard a few years ago was the Danish cartoons, right? Muslims went into an uproar around the world, and there was riots and there was craziness. Well, for Muslims, if we draw pictures of angels, of prophets, or of God, we're insulting them. Because none of us know what they look like. We're not depicting them correctly. We might be, being insulting in some way. So Muslims are asked not to draw images of God, of prophets, or of angels. Now, most of us just don't draw them. We don't go angry and crazy when somebody else does. But we have to look at that in the context of whatever's going on politically in those countries and wherever that's happening. But in the meantime, the picture you see here is of a beautiful sunrise or sunset, whichever it may be, but no angel. Muslims believe that God created human beings, gave us the ability to choose between right and wrong. And then God, in his mercy and his compassion, sent us teachers over and over again from the beginning of time until the Prophet Muhammad to teach us on how to make good choices. Don't lie, don't steal, don't kill, all of those things. And those teachers are who Muslims refer to as prophets. According to Muslim beliefs and Muslim traditions, there have been over 100,000 different prophets from the beginning of time until the Prophet Muhammad to every nation in the world, every corner of the world, every time that's come by, that he sent people to teach us. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who Muslims consider to be prophets of Islam. These are some of the people that Muslims consider to be prophets of Islam. We consider Adam to be the first man on earth. Many generations later, we believe there was Noah. Many generations after that, we believe there was Abraham. According to Muslim tradition, Abraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. From Ishmael's family, we have Muhammad, and from Isaac's family, we have Moses, David, and Jesus. Now, do we know as Muslims the names and stories of all over 100,000 prophets out there? No, we don't. We know there are references to them in the Quran, but we don't know the names and stories of all of them. We do know the names and stories of about 25 of them, who are actually mentioned by name in the Quran. A little bit about the Prophet Muhammad himself. Everybody comfortable with the annotation CE? Anyone not know what CE stands for? CE basically refers to Common Era. It basically is an academic annotation for what we normally generally use as Christian dates, right? AD and BC. It's just that in academia, they changed it to Common Era because the Christian dates are the commonly accepted calendar worldwide. Everybody uses it. So CE stands for AD, BCE stands for BC. Okay? So we believe that the Prophet Muhammad was born in 570 in the city of Mecca, which is in western Saudi Arabia. We believe that at the time he was born, Nobody around him knew he was a prophet. He himself did not know he was a prophet. And people around him were mostly polytheists. At the age of about 40, we believe that Muhammad was visited by the angel Gabriel, who gave him a message from God telling him he's a prophet. He then started to share this message with his friends, his family, his neighbors, and as you can imagine, some guy generally starts saying, hey, God speaks to me, what would the rest of us do? Like, oh yeah, oh, something's wrong. And that's what they did, right? People called him crazy, they called him a liar, they wanted to have nothing to do with him, but they didn't just stop there. They didn't stop at just ridiculing him. They actually went after him and said, you need to stop. And then when he wouldn't pay attention to them, they went after his followers who came from less fortunate tribes. They were not as rich. And so they persecuted them, they tortured them, and in some cases even killed them, right? The early Muslims went to the Prophet and said, we can't do this. We really just, it's too much. And so he told them to go south to Abyssinia, which is present-day Ethiopia. He said, there's a Christian king there. He's a very just man, and he'll take care of you, he'll protect you. So a small group of Muslims left Makkah and went running down to Abyssinia. But some Meccans must have seen them because they weren't chasing after them. In Abyssinia, there must have been some ruckus in the street because all of these people were brought before this king. And when the king said, who are you people? The Meccans spoke up first and said, they're slaves who escaped. And he turned around to Muslims and said, are you slaves? He said, yes. He said, you need to go back. And they said, wait, but our prophet told us that you're a just king. And that you would protect us as he was a prophet. And they explained to him about Muhammad. And he said, what does he teach you? And he teaches us about the prophets, he teaches us about Jesus. He said, what does he tell you about Jesus? Well, the Quran consists of 114 chapters. Not a single chapter in there is, one of them is dedicated to Mary and Jesus. And so these people started then reciting that passage, that chapter, to this king. And when they were done, he said, is that what you believe? And they said, yes. So he told the Muslims to go home, because these people had his protection. So the very first person to give refuge to Muslims was a Christian king. Well, back in Mecca, Muslims who stayed on kept suffering and kept tortured and being pushed out of their homes to the outskirts of Mecca. Well, people from a town about 300 miles away came to the Muslims and spoke to the Prophet, and they said, if you come to our town and you help us deal with these to Yathrib, today called Medina, in the year 622. The reason that's important, other than that fact that it's safe, Muslims like Jews and Christians and people of other faiths keep track of enough. And just like the Jewish calendar, the Muslim calendar is also a lunar calendar, one that's based on the phases of the moon rather than the phases of the sun. Right now, we're in the year 1440, I think. I keep pushing myself ahead so far that I'm jumped like 2 years. I think we're in 1440. Coming up in a few days, it's going to be 1441. I think I'm fairly safe on that one. Yes? The Quran supposedly, according to Muslim beliefs, was written as it was being recited. So basically in 610, when Muhammad first received revelation, he would memorize it and then he would repeat it to his followers. And Muslims at that time, although he himself couldn't read or write, majority of his followers couldn't read or write, there were scribes who did. And so as he was reciting it to his followers, it was being written down. But it didn't make any sense to give it to anyone, so they rolled this up and kept it in his home. But after Muhammad died, there were many people who were dying out of old age, out of battle, out of sickness, and so there weren't enough people memorizing the Quran in time to catch up. So what they did was, leadership at that time said that we need to bring out those scrolls from his home, sit down with people who've memorized it along with the Prophet, and make sure that what's written down is what's actually being recited. And at that time is when they realized they needed to put in vowels because Arabic didn't have vowels at the time. And so that's when that process of making sure what's recited is the same as what's written took 60 years. Once that was complete, it was 3 leaders worth, or 4 leaders worth, I think, Uthman, 3 leaders worth. So different leadership came in, and this process continued. Once that was completed, they made 2 full copies. One went to Spain, and one went to Turkey. The one in Spain never survived history. The one in Turkey still exists and is still there at the Topkapi Museum there. So the Quran for Muslims is its an original form. It's in Arabic, it's the same Quran that's always been there for 1400 years. And how we know that is because the majority of Muslims, even today, cannot read or write Arabic. So it's been passed down as an oral tradition from parent to child or teacher to student for 1400 years. If there are Muslims, I mean, I've done a presentation where there are some Muslims in the audience, and I'll say, hey, could the Muslims please raise their hands? And they'll raise their hands, and I will recite from the Quran in Arabic, and I'll say, please finish this for me. And they'll finish it off. Not because they know me, but because they know the Quran. So the Quran is only in Arabic, and it's the words in Arabic have never changed. The translations, very many and quite varied in some cases. I personally, when I study the Quran, I don't know Arabic. And so I study the Quran in English. But I go to about 12 different English translations, and I see them side by side and make sure that I'm getting somewhere where that message would be the same. And there's a lot of people like me who, the majority of people don't know Arabic. And so they learn the best they can. Through translations. And translations, as you all well know, are only as good as the translator, right? You're depending on that person's filter of life. If that person hates humanity, well, guess what your translation's going to sound like? So, I believe that Muhammad died at the age of 63 in the city of Medina. Muslims believe that although there were over 100,000 different prophets, that only a handful of them had been given divine revelation or direct messages from God. According to Muslim beliefs, Muslims believe in the scrolls as revealed to Abraham, in the Torah as revealed to Moses, in the Psalms as revealed to David, in the Gospel as revealed to Jesus, and in the Quran as revealed to Muhammad. Now, according to Muslim belief, all the rules and laws contained in the Quran are also within the first 4 books. It's just, reality is, I barely get to the Quran. I'm not going to have time to get to all the other scriptures. There are scholars out there who can study the others. The scrolls revealed to Abraham are no longer available, so the Torah onwards is what other people study, but average people like me, we barely get to the Quran. So it's not something that we're going to be able to study. In the Quran, the word itself is an Arabic word. It means recitation. And I told you earlier that it was revealed in the Arabic language, has 114 chapters. Muslims around the world are asked to memorize at least portions of the Quran to use during their daily prayer. Leah, would you mind playing not the first thing I asked you to do, but the one that says Fatiha? I just want you to hear what the Quran sounds like. This is the opening passage of the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Now, what he basically said or recited was the opening verses of the Quran. It basically amazingly enough, if you look at it and you read the words, they sound a lot like the Lord's Prayer. Basically, it says, and I'm going to pretend that I can translate on my own. Here we go. No. Here we go. All right. In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the bestower of mercy. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. And by the way, I said worlds, not world. I did say it in plural. The entirely merciful, the bestower of mercy, the master of the day of judgment. Thee do we worship, and thine aid we seek. Show us the straight path, the path of those of whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, on whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. Good God, this is not English. It's not English spoken in 2019. I wish I had a better translation. But basically, it's glorifying God, asking for forgiveness, thanking Him, and asking for guidance, right? If you look at the essence of the Lord's Prayer, it's pretty much what it's doing. And so this is the one passage in the Quran that's the very first chapter, and it's used throughout our daily prayer over and over and over. That's the very first one all Muslims get to learn. It's the one that we memorize. It's the one that we use multiple times a day. Muslims around the world do try and recite from the Quran. They, like I said, memorize portions of it. There are millions of Muslims worldwide who have memorized the Quran from cover to cover. And those people are called Hafiz Quran, protectors of the Quran. Because people like myself, out of 114 chapters, I know 15. And by the way, the chapters in the Quran could be 3 lines long or 35 pages long. Guess which ones I know? So this head doesn't work that well. But young people memorize much faster and they learn better. And they recite, and to me, during my daily prayer, I'm going to be reciting passages from the Quran in Arabic. My daily prayer is conducted in Arabic. But that's my formal prayer. There's also my personal prayer, and I will get to that. Other than the Quran, Muslims depend on what did Prophet Muhammad do and say? What did he teach? Just like in Christian tradition, people talk about what would Jesus do. The idea for Muslims is what did Muhammad do and what did he say? That's considered his sunnah. And so following his sunnah is also required. So follow the Quran and follow the Prophet. That's what Muslims are taught to do. Some of the teachings of the Prophet basically are God does not look upon your body and appearance, He looks upon your heart and your deeds. The world is green and beautiful, and God has appointed you His stewards towards it. So these are teachings from the Prophet Muhammad to tell us how to be and how to behave with the world, with people around us, etc., etc. The Quran is, for Muslims, a guiding book, but it doesn't give us details. It basically gives us big, broad stroke laws, following the way he behaved, following the way he lived. That's how Muslims then learn to follow the Quran. Muslims believe in a day of judgment. We believe that sometime in the future, the world as we know it is going to come to an end. At that point, we believe that we will be judged for the way we lived in this life. According to Muslim beliefs, all of our deeds in this life, if our good deeds outweigh our bad, hopefully we go to heaven. If our bad deeds outweigh our good, we probably go to hell. But Muslims do believe in God's grace. We believe in His compassion. We believe if we sincerely repent and ask for forgiveness, that He would forgive us, as long as we don't keep repeating what we've just asked for forgiveness for. But so Muslims do believe that we do have a chance, even if we've done many things wrong. But there are certain things that even God won't forgive. That being bad to other human beings, we need to get their forgiveness. We can't just live our lives any which way. The sixth belief Muslims have is translated to say God's will, but it's so much more than just God's will. The Arabic word is al-qadr. Al-qadr means so much more than just God's will. It just means everything in creation is His domain. He knows what happened in the past, what's happening currently, what's going to happen in the future. And it doesn't mean that we're his puppets, that he chooses for us what to do. We do have choice. That's what he gave us. But there's certain portions of my existence that I have choice, and certain portions of my existence that don't have choice. Where I don't have choice is where I was born, when I was born, the color of my skin. None of that was through choice. But what is my choice is whether or not I stand up here and tell you lies, whether I eat non-stop chocolates and donuts. Those are choices I'm making, right? So certain part of my life is choice, and certain part of my life is not choice. And that all comes under God's will and God's domain. Now, I talked to you about Muslim beliefs. I'm going to talk to you about some practices. There are 5 forms of worship and prayer that Muslims conduct on a regular basis. Okay, I got to take that back. Muslims are required to conduct on a regular basis as part of their religious training and religious beliefs. These are referred to as the 5 pillars of Islam. The very first one is literally a profession of faith. At least once in our lifetimes, truly believing these words and truly meaning them, all Muslims throughout the world are required to say this in Arabic, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It translates to there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Now, having told you I'm supposed to say that at least one time in my whole life, I end up saying that between 12 to 25 times every single day as part of my daily prayer. Now, daily prayers. Earlier I told you there's 2 different ways Muslims pray, right? There's a personal prayer and there's a formal prayer. My personal prayer can be conducted in any language, any time of day, all day long, or never at all. That's just me talking to God. My formal prayer, which this is required to be conducted 5 times every single day, starting at the age of about 10 until the day I die. Those 5 times in the day are before sunrise, at noon, in the middle of the afternoon, after sunset, and then at nighttime. During this prayer, I will conduct everything I say in Arabic using passages from the Quran that I've memorized, where I'm glorifying God, I'm asking for forgiveness, I'm asking for guidance, I'm thanking Him. Also, during this time, I'm going to face Mecca, which is in Western Saudi Arabia. If we live in America, North America, most of us are going to face kind of northeasterly, so that we kind of go over the pole to face Mecca. It's a shorter distance, but I guess we could also do east, depending on where we are. Some people will use the prayer rug because of the way we pray. During our prayer, we bow and we touch our head to the ground. Those actions are repeated 2, 3, or 4 times, depending on which prayer it is. The early morning prayer, it's only 2 requirements. In the middle of the afternoon, it's 4. And then at sunset, it's 3. So it varies. Women like myself who don't normally cover their hair with a headscarf, we will cover our hair with a headscarf to pray out of respect and to avoid distraction. Prayer rugs are not necessary. They're not holy. They're not untouchable. It's just something to keep dust and dirt off of my clothing and my face, because I can pray anywhere I am. I can pray out in the street. I can pray out in the desert. It doesn't matter. Because all of the earth belongs to God. So we can pray wherever we are as long as it's a clean space. A place to pray, like a church or a temple, is called a masjid in Arabic. And it literally, if you go to the root word, it means a place where you prostrate. The European or English word for that is a mosque. The top 2 pictures are pictures of mosques in D.C. and Ohio. Inside a church, you normally see pews and rows of chairs like this, right? If you walk inside a mosque, all you're going to see is a big empty hall with carpeting. You might have a couple of chairs here and there for people who have leg injuries, for elderly people, for pregnant people, to be able to sit and pray. But everybody else, because if you look at the way they pray, they stand, they bow, they touch their heads to the ground, chairs will just get in the way, right? So you have big empty halls where you pray. Now I have a question for you guys. For Muslims, we can pray 5 times a day, all by ourselves, anywhere in our houses, anywhere we are. But when we do pray in congregation, large groups of people pray together, men and women pray separately. Can anyone tell me why? Oh, I love you. Who said that? You're the best. She said to avoid distraction. Absolutely. Because if I'm doing one of those numbers, I don't need somebody behind me distracted by my clothes, right? I just need to be able to pray, and I don't want to be distracted by them either. So it's got nothing to do with superiority or inferiority. It's just to do with being able to pray for the 5 to 7 minutes that I'm praying without being distracted by anything. So that's why men and women will pray separately. And that's not so unusual if you go to Orthodox Jewish temples, if you go to other places of worship, men and women do pray separately. It's mostly because of the postures we assume, for no other reason. Now, the third pillar of Islam is called zakat. It is a required donation to charity once a year based on our wealth. Now, wealth is different to income. Income is money that comes in on a regular basis to take care of my needs and necessities and that of my family. Food, clothing, housing, education, medicine, all of the things that my family needs. Once I've taken care of all of that and I have money sitting around that's not needed by my family, and that sits around for a whole year where my family didn't need it for a whole year, I take 2.5% of that and I give it to the needy. So not all Muslims can do this, right? Only Muslims who have wealth can give to those who are in need. Those who are needy are going to probably receive that, right? Receive the zakat. Muslims, also the fourth pillar of Islam is fasting during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Muslim calendar. I had mentioned earlier that Muslims follow or keep track of a lunar calendar to keep track of their holy days and festivals. Ramadan just came and went in the beginning of May to the beginning of June this year. Next year we expect it to start towards the end, the 3rd week of April to the last week of May, and then go back another 10 days the year after. So every year we expect it to go back 10 to 12 days. So it goes around on a full cycle in about a 33-year cycle. So the next time you're going to have Ramadan in the month of May, beginning of May to early June, is going to be about 33 years from now. So otherwise you end up having Ramadan, go along. So it could be in the winter, it could be in the spring, depends on which year you were born in and how old you are at that time. So I've kept my fast throughout, the year, in the wintertime, in the summertime, in the spring, and everything. So throughout my lifetime. How do Muslims fast? The way Muslims fast is they do not eat or drink a single thing during daylight hours. Nothing is to go past our lips. Not water, not crackers, not bread, not chewing gum. If people smoke, they're not supposed to smoke. Nothing is to go past our lips during daylight hours. Once the sun goes down, we can eat and drink as we please. And then again, before the sun rises, we stop eating and drinking again. Now, who is supposed to fast? Healthy adult Muslims. Little children are not required to fast. Elderly, frail people are not required to fast. Pregnant women, not required to fast. People who are terminally ill, not supposed to fast, right? So what's going on? First and foremost, who's considered an adult in Islam? Somebody who's come of age. Anyone who's hit puberty is considered an adult. So anywhere from the age of 11 to 15, pretty much as people are coming of age, that's when they take responsibility of keeping the fast and, becoming adults. There are some young ladies who come of age a little bit younger, 7, 9 years old. Their families, their communities do not consider them adults until they're 11 or 12 years old. They will hold off on that and say, this person needs to grow, and let them have a little bit of time growing, and then by the time they're 11 or 12 years old, they'll start fasting and taking responsibility for their own actions and their practice of their religion. Elderly people, because it's not supposed to be detrimental to you, it's meant to be teaching you stuff. If they're weak and it's going to just make them weaker, they're not supposed to fast. But there is a difference between a child not fasting and an elderly person not fasting. The child has no obligation of a fast. The elderly person still has the obligation of a fast, but they can't fast because it would hurt their health. And so what they do is they pay enough to feed a needy person for every day that they're going to miss. In America, most cities have calculated that to be about $10 a day. So if an elderly person gives $300 to a needy person, they've taken care of the obligation of fasting during the month of Ramadan. They can do all the other worship that they normally would do. Now, can a person like me just give $300 at the beginning of the month and say, I'm free to go? No. If I'm a healthy adult, I don't get to take that option. I should fast. Now, am I telling you that every single Muslim on the planet who's healthy and adult is fasting? I can't vouch for that. I cannot tell you what all the other Muslims are doing worldwide. All I can tell you is in my family, every adult who's healthy has always fasted for generations that I know. So I don't know of people who don't fast. I got sick about 4 years ago where I was crazy high fever for about 6 weeks. And it just happened to be in Ramadan, and this fever just wouldn't go, and they couldn't. Oh, by the way, fever of unknown origin is a thing. I was shocked. I was like 6 weeks of torture of every test on the planet, and you came back with fever of unknown origin? Yeah. And I had to miss Ramadan too. And I actually could not fast during Ramadan at that time. And being a person who's fasted since the age of 12, that was really difficult for me because I couldn't understand, it made sense in my brain, but it didn't make sense here, how Ramadan was going on without me fasting. But at the end of Ramadan, I actually was able to just sit and thank God for His mercy. That it's His mercy that He lets me not fast when I'm sick, right? He says, stop, make yourself better, you can come back and fast whenever, but you need to get better. So it took me a while to understand there's a mercy in that. But, when you get used to a certain mindset, it's difficult. Pilgrimage. Once in our lifetimes, Muslims, again, healthy adult Muslims, are required to take a journey to Makkah, the city in Western Saudi Arabia, in the 12th month of the Muslim calendar and conduct 5 days of ritual and worship at that site. Now, this literally took place last week around the world, in Makkah. So Muslims around the world celebrated their holiday on Sunday. So Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, those 5 days, I guess Tuesday as well. Those 5 days were Muslims from around the world, anywhere from 2 to 4 million Muslims had shown up there to conduct this form of worship and prayer. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be difficult, but it's meant to be a trial that we're supposed to go through to acknowledge and commemorate the trials and tribulations of the Prophet Abraham and his family. This is not about the Prophet Muhammad. Hajj is about the Prophet Abraham. So Abraham and his family are very important to Muslims in their worship and practice as well. This building is called the Kaaba. It's a cube-shaped building. It is covered in a black cloth that is changed out once a year. All of that gold along the top is gold thread calligraphy of passages of the Quran that are written written all the way around. If you see down towards the bottom, you see little white dots. Those are people bowing down in prayer. That is the only place you're going to see people actually bowing towards the Kaaba, because if you pull yourself all the way out, can you see the Kaaba up there? Little thing right there. So all of these are concentric circles of people bowing. But if you go look at it from the moon, those concentric circles are going all the way out to every country in the world. So by the time you get to America, it's a straight line, right? Your circle is so big that the line is straight. So all of us are facing towards that building. We're not praying to that building. Muslims do not pray to the Kaaba, we pray towards the Kaaba. We pray to an unseen God, and the only reason we pray towards the Kaaba is for the sake of uniformity, so that everybody's doing the same thing. Otherwise, there'd be chaos. I'd stand up to pray, my son could come along and pray at me, and somebody else could pray across me, so we just make sure we're all praying in the same direction. So just for the sake of uniformity. Muslims celebrate 2 major holidays, as important to Muslims as Christmas and Easter are to Christians. The first one is celebrated at the end of the month of Ramadan, and the other one is celebrated as the Hajj comes to an end. So last Sunday was when Muslims throughout the world celebrated Eid al-Adha, and June 4th was when Muslims around the world celebrated Eid al-Fitr. Both are 3 to 4 day holidays. The first day starts off by giving to charity. The first things Muslims do is give charity in the morning of each holiday, and then they go to a big congregational prayer, and then they spend the rest of the day and the next 2-3 days visiting with family, giving each other gifts, wishing each other a happy and blessed Eid, and just spending time with friends and family. What is it that we give to charity on the first one, Eid al-Fitr? We can give food, money, clothing, just about anything. What we give for charity on the second one is meat. Yes, we can give money, yes, we can give clothing, but we give meat. Because if you know the meanings of these ones, Eid al-Fitr stands for festival of the breaking of the fast, and Eid al-Adha is the festival of the sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice that Muslims are giving today. It is in reference to the sacrifice that the Prophet Abraham was asked to give of his son's life to show his love and obedience of God. So Muslims remember that, and to commemorate it, they will go to a butcher and have an animal slaughtered, cleaned, and packaged, and keep part of the meat for themselves, 1/3 of the meat for themselves, 1/3 of the meat for their family and friends, and 1/3 of the meat for the needy. So everybody gets something in terms of charity on both the holidays. Now, just believing in God and praying and worshiping and fasting, all of those things, don't make me a good person. If you go back to what the teachings of Islam are supposed to make me a good person to those around me. So just going out there and praying all by myself and fasting for myself and giving to charity, unless I'm out there making a difference for my neighbors, being respectful to my elders, being kind to those less fortunate than me, I'm not a good Muslim. So this is what ihsan means for Muslims. This is the third dimension. It's an Arabic word. Ihsan comes from the root word hasana. Hasana is beauty, is beautiful. And ihsan is to make beauty happen. The goal of Muslims should be to make beauty happen every day. Through our words, through our actions, through everything that we do. Unfortunately, you don't see that all the time. But that's what this is about. Now, I'm going to stop here and just open it up to questions. So again, you don't have to just ask me about this. There's probably 1,000 other things you'd rather know, because what you see on the news is very different to what I've just brought up. So I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. And before I do that, Leah, would you mind playing the other video, the sound clip? This is a call to prayer. Muslims around the world 5 times a day will hear this call to prayer to remind them it's time to pray.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
I bear witness there's no God but God.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
I bear witness there's no God but God.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God.
حي على الصلاة.
Come to prayer.
حي على الصلاة.
Come to prayer.
حي على الفلاح.
Come to success.
حي على الفلاح.
come to success.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
God is the greatest. God
La
is the greatest.
ilaha illallah.
Thank you. There's no God but God. So that is a call to prayer that Muslims can hear 5 times a day. If we live in majority Muslim countries, you're going to hear that a lot. In countries such as the United States, we do have a sound ordinance. In fact, when I moved here in 1981, I remember being quite shocked that I couldn't hear church bells. And after about 3 weeks of being here, I turned around to my husband and said, "Why don't I hear church bells on Sunday morning? What is wrong?" And so he said, "Well, we have sound ordinances here. We don't want to disturb other people." Really? I can put up with somebody's loud music blaring through my car to the point where my ears are hurting, but I'm not allowed to hear a church bell ring? It baffled me. I mean, I was only 19 at the time, don't get me wrong. I was baffled. I was like, what on earth? And of course, that extends to all faith traditions. And so in Islam, Muslims will not have a call to prayer being heard outside of their mosque. So when a call to prayer is recited in a mosque, it's within the walls of the building. So if you're in the building, you can hear it. There are apps around the world. I mean, every kind of app everywhere. So people are carrying these phones around, and whatever city they're in, you may hear this go off in their phones. And the shocking thing to me that, I'm sorry, it's really irritating, is you're sitting inside a mosque, the call to prayer is going off, and 17 different phones are also giving you the call to prayer. Come on, guys. At least in the mosque, turn it off. So that happens too. So I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. Just to let you know that as part of our worship services, we have no music. We don't have singing. We don't have songs. We don't have any kind of music as part of our worship services. A very melodic call to prayer beforehand. And if somebody's reciting the Quran if a person who's able to recite has a beautiful voice and they recite beautifully like the guy did, that you'll get. But in general, there is no music as such. There are the equivalent of hymns and songs that praise the Prophet Muhammad and God, but those are sung privately by people, not as worship, but just as them praising the Prophet and God. It's got nothing to do with worship. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. Yes?
So, a couple hundred years ago, Christianity, King James of England kind of said, hey, we'll provide no English, right? And kind of helped with printing presses, make it more available. Do you see Islam potentially going that same route in the future or different? Just on the things like Indonesia's largest Muslim population, they're obviously not Arabic nation. We see eventually them, imams there coming out with more local translations.
They're already there. The local translations are already there. The translations are there for people to understand what the Quran says. But Muslims will still memorize it in Arabic, and they will still recite in Arabic. They'll come back, and they'll read what the meaning is, but they'll recite in Arabic. And they stay with that because the Arabic hasn't changed. The translations could be anything, right? So, I'll give you an example. The word nafs in Arabic has been translated to be self, soul, being. They're not that different, but they're different, right? So I'm going to talk about the nafs. I'm not going to call it a soul. I'm not going to call it a being. I'm not going to call it a self, because that might change or restrict the meaning to what it actually is. So for that reason, Muslims in general around the world will stay and have stayed with the Arabic recitation of the Quran and leaving the Arabic Quran as is. There's, like I said, hundreds of languages, translations of the Quran, but the Quran itself is this. What I call all those translations are translations of the Quran. Quran is only in Arabic. And so Muslims, 1,400 years, they haven't changed it. Doesn't look like they're aiming to do that anytime soon. Because I think there's enough people that just keep saying, no, this is how we pray, this is how we do it. And so and it's a quarter of the world's population. I think they're pretty much staying with it. There might be a few people who try to do it differently, but the prayer is going to stay. Like when somebody converts to Islam and Arabic is not their first language and they're still memorizing, they will conduct all their 5 daily prayers in their own language while memorizing the Quran in Arabic. And once they've learned that, they'll switch it out and pray in Arabic. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, if it happens. Anyone else? Yes. That's actually a very good question. The way the Quran was recited, you heard the melody. There are 7 acknowledged and accepted different styles of recitation. But each person, I think when they're asked to elongate the tones and go up and down, they'll choose how they do that. So it does vary a little bit in that, but not dramatically. The call to prayer does vary from region to region. From West Africa, it's very different to what you hear in Central Asia, very different to what you hear in Malaysia. So they are very different. And that's everybody doing their thing. I heard one several years ago over here locally by an African-American gentleman, and it was one of the most beautiful calls to prayer I've ever heard in my life. And I wish I taped it. I don't know who he was. I have no way of getting back and saying, can you please do that again? Because that was lovely, and it was very different to what you heard. It was very different to what most people hear around the world. But again, it was just a call to prayer, and he got to ad-lib it whichever way he wanted to. It was lovely. The melody? I don't know, because I memorize the Quran, but you heard what he recited, right? Surah Fatiha, the one. I'll recite it to you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. I did not sound as cool as him. But I memorized it, and the reason is the Quran itself is like poetry. There are repeated lines that just rhyme. My 3-year-old grandson will stand next to me, and he goes, "Een, een, een," at the end of every line. He doesn't know the whole thing, he just knows "een," because he's a Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. So he just goes "een, een" at the end of every line with me. And at the end he goes, "Ameen." So he gets the amen in as well. So I think it's more the rhythm of the rhyming that helps people memorize. But I always used to question as to why they have the tune, the melody, and it could be because people's voices project when they sing. Maybe that's what it is. So it could be that, and the long tones and stuff. But you're probably right. I should look that up now. Yes. Well, yes and no. It's like imagining that every Christian on the planet is going to go ahead and study the Bible and all of the Psalms and everything. It doesn't happen. There are some Muslims who will study everything. There are others who will learn from teachers and parents who might just teach them some stuff from the Quran and the Hadith. Some may just stick to the Quran, because that's the one they're supposed to at least follow, basically. Every Muslim on the planet is going to be very different. So Hadith is something that is taught in some weekend religious schools, along with Quran, but Every weekend school is going to be different in what they study and what they teach. So most Muslims are able to repeat things from the Quran more so because they're memorizing anyway. Hadith is usually not studied by a lot of people. It's just kind of passed on as a tradition in your family saying, well, the Prophet always did this, you need to remember, but I couldn't tell you chapter and verse where they got that from, right? The Prophet always did this, the Prophet always did this, but it's never passed down as a scholarly text to us. So hopefully that helps. Wow, so many things. Question is, was there something? No, you're fine. The question is, was there something amazing that Muhammad accomplished that everybody holds him in such high regard? Where do I start? Here was a person who came to a society that was very patriarchal. If you didn't have a father, you were an orphan. You didn't have anyone. His father died before he was born. His mother died when he was 7 years old. His grandfather, who was his protector, died the same year. His uncle, his father's brother, took care of him until he reached his 40s, I guess. And when you say protection, you got the protection of your clan, right? Your clan protected you. Your uncle was the head of the clan, so he protected you. Muhammad was known from a very young age to be trustworthy and honest. He was known to be able to mediate, be an ombudsman, basically, mediate between people who are fighting and bring people to a good conclusion and without breaking apart. They always talk about a story of way before he was a prophet, in his late teens or his early 20s. There were 4 tribes in Mecca who were fighting when they had just finished rebuilding that square building I told you about, the Kaaba. And there's a stone in the corner, it's a meteorite, and they consider it a stone that fell from heaven, and everybody for a long time has considered that. And to put it back in its place was considered an honor. Then you're the big chief if you do that. And so these 4 chiefs were fighting as to who would do it, and they called Muhammad. They said, Muhammad, this is our dilemma. Whoever puts it in there is, a greater man than everyone else, but we have to get... So he said, well, why don't we take this cloth, put the thing in there, and all 4 of you carry it to the spot. And all 4 of you are then equally able to lead this community. And I don't know ultimately if when they got there, he got to put it in, or if all 4 of them managed to put it in, or what happened, but this was considered his ability to bring a community together and dispel all the issues that would happen. He was also very, very kind to orphans and widows. All of his teachings were about taking care of those less fortunate in their communities. So there was a lot of things that we follow about Muhammad just because he was a kind and gentle man. The way he lived his life is how I hope to live my life all the time. Every time I come to a place where I want to make a choice, or I have to make a choice, I sit back and I think, what was the character of this person? How would he have chosen? And so the amazing thing for Muslims is that I don't just have one life coach, Muhammad. I actually have 25 life coaches, all the other prophets that came before him as well. So I get to reach into my treasure trove of life coaches and get examples. But Muhammad was known to be a great man to even his enemies. We have stories of this one woman who used to despise him, and every single day she would come to his front door and drop all her trash on his front door. And he would come out in the morning, and he would go to work and come back, or go to people and come back, and he'd have it cleaned up and stuff. And every single morning it was the same thing. One morning he came out, and there was no trash. And he asked what happened to the lady who drops the trash here, and people didn't know. So he went looking for her, and he found out who she was, and he went to her home, found out she was sick, and she was not able to come to his house and drop trash. And she looked at this man and she goes, why would you come looking for me? He goes, I was worried. You didn't come to my house, I thought something had happened. So this is how honest he was and how gentle he was as a person. He wasn't doing it to win hearts and love people. He was doing it because that's who he was. And people around him just basically got attracted to this person because he genuinely cared. When they were living in Medina, there were Christian tribes and Jewish tribes, mostly Jewish tribes there as well. And they talk of a time when Muhammad was sitting and teaching Muslims, and a funeral procession was going by. And he stood up and he started praying. And one of the people was sitting with him and said, "Why are you praying? That's a Jewish person." So he turned around and he goes, "It's a person, and they're going to God." And so everybody else stood up and prayed with him. So for him, he's known as, he was sent here as a mercy to mankind. Not a mercy to Muslims, not a mercy to men. He was sent as a mercy to mankind. So Muslims always consider that that's who he was, a merciful, compassionate man. So hopefully I gave you some examples. There's a lot. So hopefully that helped. Thank you.
Ezra, before I let you go, could you talk just a little bit about what your faith has meant to you throughout your life?
What my faith has meant? You didn't say you were going to put me on the spot. What my faith has meant to me, yeah. It is actually, I'm grateful. I am grateful to the family I was born to. I'm grateful that they have been a practicing family for generations, because this was not something we suddenly discovered. This was something that was part of who we were for generations. And that gives me a lot of strength. It gives me a lot of strength because the men in my family know they're supposed to love and support the women in the family. The women in the family know they're supposed to love and support the men in the family. It's not a guess, okay, we might do it, or, oh yeah, it is, this is what you're required to do, this is the way you're supposed to be. Respect for your elders, it is what it's supposed to be. Taking care of the less fortunate. I never thought about it until I became an adult and realized I was doing all these things as part of my nature. I did not realize that that's what was taught to my family for generations through my faith. And I think that's what's given me the strength. It gives me the strength through a lot of rough times as well. For example, when somebody passes away, a Muslim, the moment we hear news of that person passing away, is supposed to say, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." To him we belong, and to him is our return. Just knowing that I can say that gives me goosebumps. Just knowing that that's where the person is going gives me a sense of peace. So even at your darkest time, I have something to hold on to that gives me a little bit of support. So that's what it's meant to me. It's been easy for me. So thank you all very much for including me today.
Yeah, thank you.
It was very
so
lovely
much.
spending time with you guys.
Yes. Thank you. So I don't know about you, but when I was answering that question beforehand in my head, there was no one sitting next to me up here. But I feel like I have like impressions of Islam, but there was so much that I didn't know. I was kind of surprised at my ignorance, like the magnitude of my ignorance. And man, there was so much incredible information. Thank you so much, Azra, for being here and sharing some of your experience as well. So next week we're going to continue our series. I'm not sure exactly where we stand next week. So Angie originally had slated that we were going to do Judaism, but it turns out Saturday night is a tricky night to have someone come speak about Judaism. So that may not happen. I think she was kind of playing with the idea of maybe talking about some mysticism. I don't know if she's landed exactly what she wants to do. But it'll be really cool because the last 2 weeks have been really great. If you weren't here, John came and talked about Buddhism and played the sitar. It was really, really cool. And those calls to prayer and recitations were so beautiful. So I'm looking forward to experiencing more new things. I think that's all we have for you guys. So thanks for being here. Feel free to kind of hang out and meet some people if you're new. Or if you see someone new, please introduce yourself and make them feel welcome. But we will see you guys next week.